So for those who've joined us, I would now like to welcome you to the future workforce of manufacturing and engineering industry. I'd now like to introduce you to Ian Curry to get us underway. And if you'd like to unmute yourself in your capable hands. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. Welcome everyone to this important webinar. The MEMIRC is very keen to try and get a handle on some of the trends, some of the challenges, some of the issues that are confronting manufacturing as we move out of what has been undoubtedly a very challenging and difficult period. There's no doubt that manufacturing will be important to the recovery and will be important to the Australian economy into the future for some time. So I welcome you all here. I'm sitting on the Adelaide Plains, the lands of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and acknowledge their relationship with country. I'm going to hand over to Sharon Robertson. Sharon's the CEO of IPSA Group. IPSA Group is the body that supports the work of a number of the manufacturing IRCs as we attempt to deal with the question of what are the skills requirements and skill standards required to build a future in Australia. And Sharon's going to take us through a bit of an introduction and a bit of the shape of what we're going to confront on the webinar today. Thanks, Sharon.
Thanks, Ian, and a big good morning or good afternoon to everyone. It's great to see so many people have joined our webinar and still a few more getting on, so that's fantastic. Just want to acknowledge, obviously, really grateful to have Ian here today to take us through this afternoon, but we also have a number of our industry reference or IRC committee members here with us this afternoon, as well as the chair of IPSA, as Ian suggested. We're the secretariat that supports the MEM IRC, as known to us, along with a number of other manufacturing IRCs. The purpose of this is a number of webinars are being run at the moment on behalf of our IRCs, and the purpose is to further the conversation around how we ensure that the skills required are made available to the Australian industry and its workforce in light of the government's, which you may have seen, the government's national manufacturing priority areas. I think we're all aware and we all acknowledge that building competitive capability in Australia's manufacturing workforce will be key to industry success locally, globally, without a doubt. We also know, as Ian alluded, that COVID-19 has certainly seen a rethinking of priorities in many, if not all, industries, but particularly in manufacturing. Before we go into anything further, we had the opportunity for Michaela Cash, who's the Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, to kick off this webinar, but she's also put together a short video, which I'd just like to share with you to set the scene for today.
As the Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, I'm delighted to be part of this webinar series. I'd like to thank IBSA Group for their leadership in bringing together so many people across diverse industry networks. The Morrison government recognises the role of the manufacturing sector to the future prosperity of the Australian economy. And these events are a great way to provide relevant and practical feedback and advice back to government so that we can ensure the best possible outcomes for industry. The modern manufacturing strategy is a central plank of the Morrison government's agenda to fast-track Australia's economic recovery and secure future jobs and growth. Of course, an important element of delivering modern manufacturing in Australia is having the right sort of skilled workers across all 6 national manufacturing priorities. Our vocational education and training system is critical to the national economy and ensuring Australia's future prosperity. We need to support people to get the skills that will help us rebuild. And our role as a government is to get the policy settings right to ensure that those in the workforce have the opportunity to upskill and reskill. We know you need a strong, responsive and adaptable training system that can meet the needs of learners and employers. This is particularly important for the manufacturing industry, with a large percentage of your workforce gaining their skills through vocational education and training courses. And that's why the Morrison government is investing around $7 billion this year alone in the VET system, the biggest investment on record. You, as businesses and industry, have already told us that you need a pipeline of skilled workers to support our economic recovery. And that's why we announced a $1.2 billion investment to help create 100,000 new apprenticeships through the Boosting Apprenticeships Commencement Wage Subsidy. It's also why we established our $1 billion Job Trainer Fund, which will provide over 300,000 additional free or low-cost training places in sectors of demand. We also established the National Skills Commission to provide a new source of intelligence on Australia's labour market, workforce changes and current and emerging skills needs. That is the key, areas of skills needs. In other words, a focus on training in areas of anticipated employment growth like modern manufacturing. The Morrison government will continue to do all that it can to support Australian manufacturing, with a focus on getting more Australians trained with the right skills to drive this important industry. This is going to be a skills-led recovery, and your engagement with events like this IBSA webinar series are a key part of getting it right. I thank you for your support and dedication to grow and modernise the manufacturing sector, and I really hope that your discussions are productive. Enjoy the webinar.
Thank you. As you've just heard from Minister Cash, today, like many of the others, really provides an excellent opportunity for industry, your good selves, to provide input into the rollout of the modern manufacturing strategy, particularly in relation to the manufacturing and engineering industry. Before I hand back to Ian, I'm just going to ask everyone to be part of a short 3-question poll. This poll is being repeated across each webinar in the series and being designed to actually gather a large quantum of data that we can actually use to support the insights that hopefully we get from today's discussion. I'll just pass over to Michelle and she's going to take us through what we need to do.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Sharon. So just the poll has opened on the right-hand side above the chat. So if you can please go ahead and make your choice for each of the 3 questions and then click that submit button at the bottom. That would be wonderful. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. We've got about another minute to go, so if you could just make your choice, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Got 18 people who just need to finalise their choices. Thank you. Then we can get going. That's just those last 5. If you could please click submit, that would be wonderful. Last 2. Thank you. All right. Popping those results up for you there, Sharon. Can you see those on the side?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much, Michelle, and thank you for everyone for providing a very quick response. Just a quick summary for those of you that are trying to sort of understand what did we say. When we talk about have you identified opportunities for your business to support the 6 modern manufacturing priority areas, you can see that probably nearly half have said yes, they identify at least 1 or 2. But obviously then there was nearly half that said no answer. So we've got some idea there. The next question was around workforce skills development. Oh, sorry, no, it isn't. It's around significant changes as to how work will be organised over the next 5 years. And one of the
RTOs, government and others who are participating in the webinar today. So in terms of format, we've got about a 30-minute opportunity for a Q&A with our 4 panellists. We encourage you to use the chat function to add comments and questions along the way. We would prefer that people stay muted for that. We're clearly having some technical issues that might help with bandwidth and other things. So if you can ensure that your microphones are muted, we may invite people along the way to ask questions and unmute. And there's an opportunity to direct any technical issues that you might have provided in the email that came with the registration link. So, firstly to the Q&A session, we're joined by 4 industry panellists. We have David Fox, General Manager of LA Services. I have short bios for most of these. David commenced his manufacturing career in the late 1980s as an apprentice fitter machinist. Through 1990s, working as a CNC machinist, he obtained a certificate and then diploma of mechanical engineering at TAFE. Over this time, his role shifted to machine design and applying CAE technologies to manufacturing processes. He then moved into metal fabrication in the year 2000, working as a project engineer, completing a Bachelor of Engineering at UTS in 2006 and entered the industrial pressure equipment industry at LA Services. 2009, he returned to UTS, completing a Master of Engineering by Research in Project Management from 2014 as General Manager of LA Services. His focus has been on integrating digital with this legacy trade and the skills and capabilities required for the future of manufacturing. Secondly, we have, Mark Goodsall's on the slide. It's not in the order that I have them, but Mark Goodsall's the head of AI Group manufacturing across Australia and has been a key player in the vet and industry development space in New South Wales for many years. I interact with Mark in a number of places, most notably on the New South Wales manufacturing ITAP. Mark is highly regarded around the country for his insights into manufacturing, got a long history of engagement and representation of manufacturers in Australia, but I don't have a detailed history of Mark, but that's an off-the-cuff introduction to Mark Goodsall, who I'm sure would be known to many of you in any event. Peter Angelico is the President of the South East Melbourne Manufacturers Association, founder and Managing Director of AVEC Group. Peter Angelico has been directly involved in manufacturing since 1992, and his ability to develop solutions is a key benefit to the customer. Peter's work career started with successful completion of an electrical apprenticeship in 1984 and running a successful electrical contracting business for 6 years prior to starting a bending company Capital A Bending Company in 1992. Economic activities driven by customer demand and finding the right solution for the right time is what drives Peter. A strong advocate for local manufacturing, where innovative solutions are the order of the day. Peter firmly believes that manufacturing has a big future. Quote, manufacturing is not dead, it's evolving. Darwin's theory of evolution is not survival of the fittest, but survival of those most capable of change. Peter's the current president of the South East Melbourne Manufacturers Alliance, SEMA. Eddie Constable is a Director of Welding Specialist WQMS, with over 14 years of experience as a welding professional, with 8 years as a welding inspector over multiple industry sectors. Eddie has gained deep first-hand knowledge and experience of the challenges associated with asset maintenance related to cracking and related weld repairs. In particular, over this period, it's become clear to Eddie that there are significant skills gap issues that the repair industry faces from both a knowledge and fundamental competency basis. After experiencing firsthand that the skills gap could not be adequately addressed via conventional methods such as welder qualification testing, Eddie co-founded Welding Quality Management Systems in order to develop a foundational competency-based welder competency program and supporting processes for the upskilling of personnel to achieve effective in-service repairs of assets and welding. I've got some questions for the panellists to get us started, but you're all invited to participate and submit questions that you might have or comments in the chat section. Thanks to the panellists today. These are incredibly busy times, and I'm always inspired to see so many industry people prepared to share with others their experiences, their views of the future, etc. So, to set the context for this discussion, the Commonwealth's Modern Manufacturing Strategy and its budget incentives provide an opportunity to take a fresh look at the implications for skills development. And we all know that having effective supply chains is a key to the future of manufacturing, and that manufacturing can't grow without that skilled workforce. So what I'd like to do is start off with perhaps David. My question, David, is what do you think will need to change in your business or industry sector over the next 5 years, and how will these changes impact on the capabilities your future workforce will need?
Okay, thanks, Ian. Hope you can hear me all right, given all the technical problems. I think, I look at it across four levels, I guess: the trade, operations, engineering and executive team. It's kind of relevant to the space I sit in at the moment anyway. From that perspective, certainly merging of those core skills around fabrication and welding, I think, is one, just in terms of, skill diversity and utilisation. So seeing it as one trade rather than different elements of it. And perhaps a sense of responsibility for making sure, your welders are trained up accordingly, which was kind of hinted at through Eddie's by our introduction. Compliance awareness, I think, is another one, and ownership and responsibilities around that at that doing level. Digital literacy, I think, is a big one, certainly around connectivity, data contribution and communication. Automation knowledge, I think, is another one, so the human to machine interaction with smarter machines, and getting more utilisation out of equipment like that, and bringing those traditional trades into that space. From an operations perspective, I think system integration and data visualisation is going to be important. Automation across administration, I think, is probably a big thing that hasn't quite come to light yet, but I think that's going to be a big thing as we move forward. Customer centricity and brand management, probably important at the operational level as well. Engineering-wise, data management, product data management and product lifecycle management, I think, are important elements coming through in that field, basically around supporting digital capability going forward. Product and process design from a data perspective rather than a process perspective, I think, is an interesting sort of line of thought. It's influencing us quite a bit at the moment. And product and system interoperability, I think, is another one. As you develop smart products, interoperability of those things is going to be an important one for having awareness of that at an engineering team. So the executive team, I think, around longer time horizons for planning, so thinking further out than you might have years ago where things didn't change so rapidly. Structured decision-making mechanisms, another one that's come to light for us, and using specialised services in areas, and partnership and collaboration to address that increased complexity, I think, of the areas. How might that impact the workforce, I think, was the second part of your question, Ian. So I think, a shift in mindset away from that sort of functional siloed approach that's kind of sat around the industry for a long time, and merging that factory and office thing, or breaking down that barrier that's been there a long time, is going to be important, so you get a more united workforce across that trades to engineering space that's got to go on when you're putting digital over the top of traditional. A willingness to upskill or cross-skill, regardless of age or position. I think you get acceptance that it doesn't matter where you sit in the organisation, there's going to be elements of upskilling and cross-skilling have to go on. And viewing investment in skills and training equally, if not as important as technology investments. That's kind of where I think, for us and the view I have at the moment, they're the things that kind of stand out for me. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question, Ian.
Oh, absolutely, and thank you for that. That was very detailed, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you as we progress the work we're doing on welding and weld repair as part of the next iteration of MEM training package, which is underway at the moment. So thank you for that. Peter, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, look, I think the main thing from our perspective, well, not just myself, but as far as our members don't go, there's plenty of opportunities out there. The supply chains need to open up and engage with the local manufacturers, and they're not doing it at the moment. And I think this is where governments have got a role. I disagree with the Minister when she's only picking out these 6 industry sectors. I think that's a bad move. You know, picking winners just hasn't worked over the time, and governments of all persuasions continue to do that. I don't know why, because it doesn't work. But I think they've got to encourage the major projects. And again, government are the biggest spender of dollars, particularly with infrastructure and manufacturing, than of anyone. So they can sort of lead this space by getting engaged there with the local supply chain. There's a lot of things like that example in New South Wales where they didn't know they were building trains in New South Wales, which was just gobsmacking from a government minister, transport minister of all people. So this is where they need to engage. We do have the capability here, but we need more customers, not more consultants. And this is where I think some of the money they're throwing at industry is just ill-targeted. It just doesn't work. And I think that's, the skills and all that are important, but nothing happens until you sell something. So until we can get access to those supply chains, and a lot of those major projects, we all know about them, we all read about them in the papers, but actually getting in, particularly at the second and third tier levels, that's where the barriers come up. It's too easy to run off overseas. And I think now one good thing with the COVID pandemic is people are now actually looking at their supply chains and looking at how do they manage their risk a lot better. So now on that point, manufacturers have to get a hell of a lot better at marketing and explain, yes, we've got to make great widgets and all that, but it's not going to sell itself. So we have to get out there and actually market ourselves and our capabilities a hell of a lot better than what we're doing. So I think that's where probably the biggest gap is. But we need customers, not more consultants. So I think that's where there's a lot of opportunity there, a lot of money being spent. There's 150-odd billion, I think, being spent on the East Coast on infrastructure alone, all government projects. Where's a lot of that money going? A lot of it's going offshore. So that's what we need to, that's where the opportunity actually rests at the moment.
So how do you think that what we're confronting and some of the things that you've raised will impact on the capability we will require out of our future workforce?
Well, I think we have the capability. One thing we've been working on a lot with SEMA is bringing a few different companies together, like-minded companies, not necessarily competitors, but bringing them together in clusters. So to say, yes, as a collective, we can produce that or deliver that particular aspect of a project. At the moment, it's all a bit ad hoc and no one really wants to get into bed together, and it's all about who's going to manage the risk or who's going to own the risk. So that's where the major project owners or major project builders, they've got to work together with the supply chain, not just treat them as the cheapest price and the race to the bottom. They've got to be a bit more engaging, which they're not really doing. Some of them are doing it, but a lot of them are. It's too easy to run off overseas, but now they've realised, hey, we can't do this all the time. So I think that's where the best opportunity is for companies, the SMEs, to get together and say, right, we can produce this particular aspect of a project as a collective, but someone's got to be able to manage that risk, and it's more of a business management thing than an actual skills and capability. We have the skills and capability here. We just sometimes don't know that.
Thanks for that, Peter. To you, Mark, I mean, it sounds to me like an opportunity for some leadership and some enhanced collaboration around the industry. What's your view from an AI group perspective?
Thanks, I agree with what David said. Sort of focusing on sort of industry-wide perspectives on the changes that are going to impact on skilling. I think there's three for me. It's not necessarily exhaustive, but they're not all been mentioned already. First of all, I think it's got to take more responsibility for its own skilling out. We have tended in the past from time to have a bit of a cargo cult mentality that we just outside the factory and there'll be skills falling on us and we just scoop them up, and when that's not happening we tend to want to blame government and other institutions. So
Mark, it might have a little audio problem with your audio. I'm wondering whether if you stopped your video it might just improve the audio.
Thanks. Yeah.
That may well be better, I think.
Is that better?
Sorry, Mark.
Okay. Yeah. But, so industry for its skilling outcomes engage the skilling system. The skilling system does have some challenges in engaging with industry and finding out what it really wants. We tend to blame the skilling system, but I think the responsibility lies on both sides. So industry's got to take some responsibility for putting input in and shaping outcomes, in engaging with it at all levels, including at schools, not only just at TAFE and at university level, and making typical apprenticeships are actually rewarding experiences and not a challenge for young people. I remember a few years ago sitting at an apprenticeship award night next to the Apprentice of the Year for a metal trades group, and he was a very impressive young man. And I asked him what was the biggest challenge in his apprenticeship, and he said through factors beyond his control, he ended up doing his apprenticeship with 3 different employers, and he said it was a matter of absolute luck as to whether any one of those employers really was interested in training him and giving him skills. Some of them were great and some of them weren't. So I think industry needs to accept its share of responsibility for its engagement with and outcomes that it gets from the skilling system, including, and companies are starting to do this, they've twigged to this, they're starting to look in unusual places for the skills that they might have or the attributes of trainees that they might train up. Instead of just looking in more traditional areas, they're starting to look a bit broader at where the attributes and foundation skills that they need might be found and already produced in other sectors. The second issue I think David already covered, which is the move to digital. It's a mindset issue, thinking digitally, being able to, as they say, being able to think how you can run a factory off an iPhone rather than have to wander around and viscerally feel and listen to the plant, being able to trust the data. And I think there's still a bit of a challenge for industry to sort of hand over that sovereignty to the data and trust the data, because that's the essence of a digital mindset. And the third one is there's some mega trends that are coming on us that successful manufacturers will need to comprehend, and they'll need their employees to comprehend, and that's energy, the energy challenge, the challenge of waste, the challenge that we are fast approaching times where stuff just is not going to be thrown away, with the challenge for making things recyclable across their whole life, and of course the ever-present challenge of safety. And I just think normalising that thinking in the training system, so that the employees we get, trainees we get, that's built into how they think about manufacturing and their jobs, will be essential, and the companies will get a lot of reward for that increasingly over time. So that's it for me.
Thanks for that, Mark. And last but not least, certainly, Eddie, can you see an effect in the asset management sector of some of the things that we've talked about, the need for change, the impact on capabilities? What's it like from your perspective?
Yeah, certainly, Ian. David, Peter and Mark made some very good points, and without doubling up on any of them, the one that stuck with me the most was with what Mark said about moving to sustainability, recycling. To me, that is directly meaning making assets last longer. There's multiple things that build up to that, but particularly as something breaks down or it's near to its end of life, design life, then we need to be looking towards effectively increasing that rather than this throwaway mentality that's currently there. The other good point there Mark had was around targeting, engaging at different levels, particularly at a school level. if I reflect back to when I was an apprentice, a very, very similar story there around at a Metals Trades Awards night. The biggest thing was accessibility of training then. I remember being able to do nighttime courses at TAFE before I was engaging in an apprenticeship. So that's also a key thing. But like what's been mentioned is industry drives that. So yeah, there's a whole there's a fragmented approach at the moment, and it needs to all fall back into line. So I hope that covers off, Ian. I think you're still muted, Ian.
Rookie mistake. Thank you for that, Eddie. What we're interested in is trying to get at some of the trends, some of the thinking, some of the ideas, some of the challenges to feed into these breakout groups that we're going to get to in a couple of minutes. So I have another question, and that question goes to how well prepared you think your business or industry is to meet the challenges of digital transformation and the other associated strategies associated with Industry 4.0. I think to some extent people have mentioned some of those, but this is about how well prepared we think we are. So I might start with David first.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Ian. I think, we're better prepared than we were in 2016 when we first started thinking about this. I'd like to say that, after 4 years we were all over it, but not really. Kind of the more stones you unturned, the more you realise how far you are from where you need to be, I think is something that we've realised. Certainly, we're acquiring the skills, starting to get some skills in place, so business intelligence people, data science people, things like that to help digitise processes. And I think at this stage we're still around, foundational digital infrastructure being constructed. So, where are we storing data? And with a, sovereign capability respect, how might customers react to that? How do we move from platform to platform depending on customer requirements? If we're looking at digital twins and assets like that, how do we roll out those services? And also the other area, I think, we're kind of struggling, all those two areas that, weren't really realised at the start because, like, I guess most manufacturers, you kind of think about the technology solutions and not all the other auxiliary things that go on around it. Business model design around service models is a big one for us. I think, sort of HR, IR challenges are there around work flexibility, with social views around what work is, as you look at workplace diversity and things like that, and merging, engineering with trades, how do you get them all working around the same time together? So I think there's some interesting, I wouldn't say the challenges, but, opportunities to kind of look at, really rethinking how trades might work rather than just bunding on a certain time and, having morning tea at a certain time. There's some challenges there to deal with. And as I said, business development, actually selling solutions that you might come up with, which I think was mentioned before somewhere. So they're kind of the things that I think we're still struggling with. But from a technology point of view, I think we're starting to understand what we need to do, and finding the right partners. We've got good relationships with the university now to help us deal with that and put the academic rigour around what we need to do. But yeah, I think it's not an easy thing to do, to take a very traditional manufacturer in the metal trades and move them into a full digital base. That's kind of my comment on that.
All right, thanks for that. Mark? We lost Mark?
My sound okay?
Sounds okay.
Okay. I think David covered it well. I suppose if we have to ask the question, then we've obviously not made the transition yet, and we'll probably have made the transition when we stop asking the question. There's no doubt COVID has accelerated digital awareness, and not just because we're suddenly running meetings over Zoom and all working from, a lot of people are working from home. It has accelerated interest in being able to digitalise supply chains, being able to run things remotely, be able to interrogate data more richly. So the the trends are much more accelerated than they were a year ago. I think the challenges still remain in cybersecurity and understanding the exposure as the digital overlay comes, the exposure that gives us in cyber. And there's still, I think, a perception that that's a technical issue, when in fact most of the cyber risks are people issues, people's behaviour. If you only need a reasonably competent technical setup to withstand most cyber exposure, provided your people behave well. And I think, as David touched on, the real rich ground for digitalisation is Industry 4 is its effect on business models. And I think manufacturers just love making things, and we still tend to think that all the richness and the value comes from the making of the thing. And if we go to buy new technology, we focus on the technology as it affects how we make things. But the real value, or just as equal value, can come out of what we're making and indeed the services we can attach to it. And there are lots of manufacturers who are finding that they can make an awful lot of money out of the service add-ons. They still need the goods and the manufacturing output, but they can make a really rich, revenue out of the service streams. But that sort of butts up against their thinking as manufacturers. So busting out of that, and I think we'll probably know we're there when we may even end up not talking about manufacturing. We may have to come up with a different to make sure we don't limit our thinking about the business model opportunities that come out of Industry 4.0.
That'll mean another name change for my organisation then, Mark, but thank you for that. Moving right along. Peter?
Yeah, just following on from Mark's point there, I think, the business model is pretty important. Yes, we can make stuff, and, it's all about really providing that solution to a customer. I think that's where selling has also changed over the last, sort of 10, 20 years, where now it's all about, again, trying to find that solution, but rather than knocking on doors and, when you do knock on doors, it becomes a price-driven market. But if you can somehow get to people in a different way that, hey, I've got a problem, who do we look for? And this is where the digital marketing becomes quite important, being able to be found when they do have that problem. Because until someone's got a problem, they don't really want to know about you. Again, marketing's got to be the right message to the right person at the right time. So knocking on a door, if they don't need you today, well, you've sort of lost your... there is no opportunity. So you've got to wait for unfortunately wait for the solution to be in the customer's mind. And so, right, how do we then find that solution, and how do we help find that solution? So I think that's where selling and marketing has changed. And it's about just delivering a total solution, not just a widget that works or whatever. So there's plenty of other ways, and that's probably one of the upsides of COVID. People have thought differently about how they go about their business, and I think that's very important. The negative side of that, I suppose, is that you haven't had the face-to-face. Nowadays, you might go to a seminar or something like this, face-to-face, meet somebody. You might get an opportunity 6, 12 months down the track. So that's where selling and marketing has changed in a different way. People still buy off people, and so they're looking for those solutions.
Thanks, Peter. Eddie, did I ask you for your view on this? Eddie?
Sorry, Ian.
No.
Bad service where I am.
Quick view?
Yeah, definitely. The manufacturing industry, I guess, dealing with the lead-up integration of 4.0, there seems to be some very good structured approaches in place. But yeah, definitely building that supplier network and the up-and-coming work is key. But if I talk just purely in the maintenance and repair stages for 4.0, definitely got a very long way to catch up in that respect. It's still very, very much a people paper-based process with small hints of automation coming along, but very, very long way to go in that space.
Oh, thank you for that. And we've kind of run out of time. We're a little over time in terms of the panel, but I'd like to to thank our panel for their contribution. It's rich pickings in terms of moving into our group breakout sessions. At some point, we'll be moved automatically into the breakout sessions. I'm noticing that we're getting into a bit of a chat about training packages in the chat room, but that's not the point of today. But people will be moved into relevant groupings where facilitators will be there to ask some further questions and prompt some industry thinking and other thinking in terms of the discussion that we've just had from our panel. So can I just very quickly apologise to those who are in the training group, because I didn't quite finish letting them know what I thought should be reported back. I'd raised 6 themes, but we got cut off, obviously talking way too much as usual.
That's all right, Ian. That's all good. I'm sure you'll be able to summarise that. Thank you very much. All right, so just wait for everybody to come back. All right, Ian, looks pretty much like we have most people back. Now,
I'm not sure. I had some technical difficulties earlier, and I'm not entirely certain whether we ended up with 2 groups or 3. So I'm not entirely certain who is reporting back from the other group or groups.
That is fine. Antonia, I think you're going to report back.
Ian, Adrian Bowden will report back from the combined group.
All right. So, Adrian, thank you for agreeing to do this. It's I find it incredibly difficult with large groups to be attempting to sort of facilitate it and also trying to capture what's gone on. So we're very grateful for your contribution to this as an IRC member.
Thank you, Ian. I'm not sure I'm going to capture everything either, and Antoinette can help me because I've been handled a couple of things there. I think probably the last statement that came out of the group was, is it all bad news, was reassuring to hear that no, the people who got to talk were that it's actually very positive at the moment, that the bad news was actually extremely positive. My only question there is, will it last, or will we drop back into where we were before, a lot of offshoring? A couple of key issues, I think, is the ability of the supply chain to meet the requirements that a lot of the 6 sectors that have been identified by the government will need to meet to be suppliers in those areas, whether it be space or defence or resource and technology. When we were talking about the good news, there was also the bad news that people are struggling to find people. So we have a shortage of workers, and I think that's not going to reduce for some time. So although we have the good news that there's business out there, we have the bad news that there's a supply of workers that is not large enough to meet the demand at the moment, and that's in all sectors. I think the other side of one of the other points is that to meet and to get into some of these marketplaces, the quality and security standards that are required are significant. There is very little support to meet and understand those requirements from governments, and as such, that's something that will be very important going forward if we want to seriously be manufacturers and be involved in the particularly space, defence or medical products. There are very high standards that are required. Made in Australia is obviously something that needs to be supported by the government, that local manufacturing is key and critical. And I think it was Nick who was mentioning in our group that the government, in part of the paper in detail for this investment, had mentioned in the actual structure of our companies that we have a lot of small companies when compared with other countries, and the government was trying to increase the size of those companies or create associations where those companies could work together to address the issues for local manufacturing. Good discussion. Don't know if I've missed anything else really, Antoinette. Antoinette, I don't know if you've got anything else you want to add.
The only other thing that I would add was it was stressed a few times because there's so many small employers that there's a need to collaborate and bring consortiums together so they can move into those markets and take advantage of those wonderful opportunities.
There you go, Ian. Back to you.
Thanks very much, Adrian. Thanks, Antoinette. I facilitated the training group and had a good discussion. I've identified, and I was taking people through the 6 themes that I thought were worthy of reporting back to this plenary. We will be able to capture some of the chat and some of the other things, but I think most of what we discussed fell into one or more of these themes. The first of which was that one of the things that we will need is greater levels of collaboration between industry, between training providers, between industry and training providers. That will be important going forward for a variety of different reasons. And one of those is the second theme, that the pace of change with technology is driving along quite quickly. And that seems to be the difference between this technological change and others. It's the pace at which that change is occurring, the scale of technology convergence and exploiting technologies. So access to technology is always going to be an issue in terms of training providers and industry itself. And there's a question about how much industry, how quickly industry reference committees can get ahead of that technological change and the extent to which training products can happen first, or whether or not we are a lagging indicator as they do in the German way of setting standards. So it becomes a question of access and understanding of technology. The lead indicators tend to be those that are marching along at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So access to technology is critical for both industry but particularly for training providers. And we talked about a couple of ways we could perhaps do better in that space, more collaboration with technology owners, companies that might let their facilities be available to training providers. And we had an example of that that was spelt out by one of the participants. And I had a notion of, why wouldn't we ask governments to put a mutual obligation requirement on companies that are getting investment grants for the introduction of technology to help make that technology available to training providers. We can't fund technology in every training provider around the country, but we can have some centres that might be able to open up, and I'm sure there's some of that work going on. We're having a debate about exactly that in the naval shipbuilding enterprise across Australia as we speak. There was an issue about data on workforce planning. We have to get better at how we set standards, the data that we use to better understand the nature of work, the nature of the skills required for that work, and how we set standards for that. And I'll come back to that standard issue in the last of these themes. But it's very important that we have contemporary understandings of how work is evolving, how jobs are being designed, and how technology convergence is affecting learning. And there were notions that as technologically savvy as some or many young people might appear to be, that the experience from a training perspective is that they are not always in possession of some of the fundamentals around numeracy, literacy, and some other skills. So we've got to get better at that. There was some frustration about state differentials. Anyone who knows me knows that that's singing to the choir. Different funding regimes, different priorities, etc., etc. So state differentials are an enormous source of frustration, I think, for many in the system. Our capacity to be adaptable to change is the fifth of those themes, and that to me would seem to require, I should say, an ability to collaborate more strongly, to start to gather and get access to some of the information you would need to know what's coming and build a strategy for adaptation. The last was the notion of we've built a system on competency rather than excellence. And I'm not going to try and summarise that debate, but it is a debate that we should probably confront at some stage. There are vastly different views about that, and I understand that, but from a training package development point of view, we've hung our hat on competency being the desired standard rather than excellence being an ambition. So we're running out of time, I'm told, but that's the summation. I hope it's reasonably accurate of the training group. So I'm done, I think, for this. I would like to personally thank people for the discussion that we've had. We will have a bit of follow-up, and I understand Sharon will be with us to talk through the wrap-up and where we go. But I'd personally like to thank all of the presenters and Adrian as a co-facilitator of one of these groups, all the other IRC members that are on here, and all of the participants that have given up valuable time at a busy time. And we hope that we will do justice to what you have contributed. So, Sharon, are you still with us?
Yes, I am, Ian, and thank you. And I'd certainly like to join Ian in thanking everyone for participating today. Sorry, it's hopefully I'm going to go for 2 more minutes. And I also wanted to thank all of the people that have played a role today, particularly our panellists. I think they really helped facilitate our thinking and discussion. Where to from here? What you will see, as you can see up on the screen, and a number of you might have seen in the actual discussion paper that supported the discussions today, is that the webinar series we're running is across each of the 6 priority areas, which will come together into an industry insights report. We'll be putting together a bit of an industry leaders roundtable early in the new year, and that will actually then finalise the report of the on-the-ground, the industry advice that we hope to provide government early next year. So watch this space. I'm going to ask just 2 quick questions. One, unfortunately, the poll we did earlier, the actual results disappeared when the red button was pushed. So I appreciate some people might need to go, but if you've got 2 seconds, if I can ask Michelle just to quickly throw that up again. I won't go through the results, but if I could just ask people before you leave, if you could just actually put, if you can remember, put what your responses are in that. Equally, for those who have to go just before, so you know, there will be a follow-up short survey that will be circulated post this webinar. So I'd really appreciate it if you could also complete that. On behalf of our IRC, I can't thank you enough for your contribution to today's webinar. I hope the rest of your day goes well. I will just hand over to Michelle to make sure I haven't forgotten any other housekeeping matters.
Sharon, done an excellent job. Thank you very much indeed. So thank you very much once again to the whole team today and for everybody's participation. So just a reminder, as soon as the poll closes, you will see in the chat box that link which you can click on to give us your survey feedback, and that's really important. So we really would appreciate that feedback. That's all for now. Thank you so much. Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you, Michelle. Anything last from you, Ian?
Oh no, I think I've had plenty to say. So it's been a good event. I think it's just important that we continue this conversation on over time. There aren't enough of these opportunities for us all to get together and chew the fat. So well done.